Alien Nurse saw his reaction and tried to cure it with her body. The Aurora's blade was a junk heap masquerading as a starship, wheezing through the Zyrillian nebula like an old man on his last lap. Captain Jake Sullivan, a human pilot with a roguish grin and a knack for trouble, had flown worse, but this bucket was pushing it. The engines hacked up plasma like a smoker's cough, and Jake's only goal was to limp to the nearest port before the whole thing exploded. That's how he ended up crash-landing on Zynara Prime, a planet of glowing jungles and a sprawling alien city that made Earth's metropolises look like ghost towns. The Zynarans, sleek humanoids with an air of superiority, weren't exactly rolling out the welcome mat for a human. To them, humans were brash, sweaty, and prone to wrecking things, like their precious customs. Jake woke in a Zynaran medical bay, his head throbbing like a pulsar. The room glowed with eerie blue light, its walls lined with pulsing machines that seemed to breathe. His flight suit was gone, swapped for a flimsy gown that left little to the imagination. He groaned, rubbing his temples, when she appeared, Nurse Lyra, Zynaran vision who stopped his heart and started it again in one glance. Her skin was a deep, unyielding purple, like amethyst carved into smooth curves, and her silver hair cascaded like liquid moonlight, framing a figure that burned with an almost supernatural allure. Her body was a masterpiece of fire and grace, full hips that swayed with every step, a waist so narrow it defied gravity, and a presence that radiated heat, as if her very essence could ignite the air. Her emerald eyes locked onto him, and Jake felt a primal jolt, his body responding in ways his flight manual never covered. "Human," Lyra said, her voice a sultry hum that vibrated through his bones. She clutched a holographic tablet, her gaze flicking over it with a mix of curiosity and judgment. "You are awake. Your vitals are irregular." She stepped closer, her silver hair shimmering under the lights, her fiery form casting a glow that made the room feel smaller, hotter. Jake smirked, propping himself up despite the ache in his ribs. "Irregular? That's just me, darling. Name's Jake Sullivan, toughest pilot this side of the galaxy." He flashed his trademark grin, hoping to charm his way out of the mess his crash had caused. Lyra's eyes narrowed, her purple skin gleaming like polished stone. "Your bravado is irrelevant, Jake Sullivan. Your ship's wreckage has sparked a diplomatic crisis. The Council demands your recovery, so you can answer for your chaos." She tapped her tablet, and a holographic scan of his vitals flared to life, pulsing with data. "Your heart rate is spiking. This is alarming." Jake chuckled, leaning back. "That's just your face working its magic. Happens when I'm around a knockout like you." He winked, expecting a flustered reaction. Instead, Lyra gasped, her silver hair swaying as she leaned in, her fingers brushing his arm. The touch sent a spark through him, like a live wire, and he couldn't tear his eyes from her fiery silhouette, every curve a promise of danger and delight. "Magic," she whispered, her voice trembling with urgency. "This is no magic. This is a medical catastrophe." She jabbed at her tablet, triggering a shrieking alarm from the machines. "Your body is showing signs of critical inflammation. We must act now." Jake blinked, his grin faltering. "Inflammation? I'm fine, sweetheart. That's just, me appreciating the view." He nodded toward her, but Lyra was already in motion, her eyes wide with panic. The holographic scan zoomed in on his lower torso, highlighting a very human reaction to her presence. Jake's face flushed as he realized the misunderstanding. She thought his arousal was a deadly disease. "This is unprecedented," Lyra said, her voice a mix of fear and fascination. "Your physiology is reacting violently. This anomaly could be fatal." She turned to him, her emerald eyes blazing with resolve. "I must initiate the healing bond immediately." Jake raised an eyebrow, caught between amusement and alarm. "Healing bond? Look, this is a mix-up." "That's not." Before he could finish, Lyra hit a switch, and the room's lights dimmed to a sultry glow. Her medical tunic shimmered, hugging her fiery form tighter, and Jake's breath hitched. "Whoa, hold on. What's the plan here?" The healing bond, Lyra said, stepping closer, her purple skin glinting like a star. It aligns my energy with yours to stabilize your condition. She climbed onto the medical bed, her movements fluid and determined, her body inches from his. The air hummed with a rhythmic pulse, and Jake's pulse raced, torn between explaining the truth and letting this wild ride play out. Her hands hovered over his chest, her touch sending heat through his skin, and he wondered if Zynaran medicine was always this hands-on. Then the door hissed open. A stern Zynaran doctor, his skin a dull gray, stormed in, his eyes narrowing at Lyra. "Nurse Lyra, stop this at once," he barked. "The human's condition is not what you assume." Lyra froze, her silver hair falling still, her face a mask of shock. The doctor's gaze flicked to Jake, then back to Lyra, his voice dropping to a hiss. "You've activated the bonding protocol with a human. Do you understand the consequences?" Jake swallowed, his cocky grin returning despite the chaos. "Yeah, Doc, spell it out. What's the deal?" The doctor's words hit like a meteor. "It means you're now bound to her forever." Jake Sullivan's heart was still racing from the bombshell dropped in the Zynaran medical bay. The doctor's words, asterisk bound to her, forever asterisk, hung in the air like a plasma grenade ready to detonate. Nurse Lyra, with her amethyst skin and silver hair cascading like a lunar waterfall, stood frozen, her emerald eyes wide with a mix of shock and mortification. Her hands, moments ago poised over Jake's chest in a misguided attempt to heal his very human reaction, now clutched her holographic tablet as if it could undo the chaos. The gray-skinned doctor, his scowl sharp enough to cut through hull plating, glared at them both, the humming machines amplifying the tension in the glowing room. "Bound," Jake said, his pilot's bravado barely masking his confusion. "Doc, I'm a free spirit, not a +1 for eternity. Can we rewind this mess?" He adjusted the flimsy medical gown, wincing at its lack of coverage, and shot Lyra a grin. "No offense, Purple, you're a stunner, but I'm not ready for cosmic wedding bells." Lyra's purple skin seemed to pulse under the blue lights, her silver hair swaying as she stammered. "This is catastrophic. The bonding protocol is sacred, meant to save lives through energy alignment. I thought your condition was lethal." Her gaze flicked to the holographic scan still highlighting Jake's lower torso, and she quickly looked away, her cheeks darkening to a bruised plum shade. The doctor's sneer could have melted steel. "Your incompetence, Nurse Lyra, has defiled a sacred right, and you, human, have violated Zynaran law by triggering it." He swiped his tablet, and a new hologram flared to life, a writhing, organic mass of tendrils and glowing nodes, pulsing with Zynaran's symbols. "The bonding protocol has linked your biology to our bioarchive, the living core that regulates Zynara's genetic harmony. Your human impulses have corrupted it." Jake raised an eyebrow, leaning back on the medical bed. "Corrupted? Doc, that's just my body saying hello. What's this bioarchive deal?" His pilot instincts kicked in, scanning the room for clues. The walls shimmered with alien tech, but the doctor's grim tone suggested this was no minor glitch. Lyra stepped closer, her fiery figure radiating heat that made Jake's pulse jump despite the situation. "The bioarchive is Zynara's lifeblood," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "It stores our genetic codes, ensuring our species and our ecosystem remains stable. Your biology, so chaotic, has introduced an anomaly. If we don't fix it, the archive could unleash mutations across the planet." Her emerald eyes met his, pleading. "Plants could turn carnivorous, animals could go feral, and Zynarans, we could lose ourselves." Jake let out a low whistle. "So, my charm's going to turn your planet into a mutant zoo? That's a new one." He grinned, but his mind was racing. He'd dodged pirates and navigated black holes, but rewriting alien DNA was a bit outside his flight manual. "All right, how do we uncorrupt this thing?" The doctor's gray skin seemed to pale. "The council has been alerted. They see you as a contaminant, human. You and Lyra must enter the forbidden jungle, where the bioarchive's core is housed, and reset it manually. He tapped his tablet, and the hologram shifted to show a dense, glowing jungle teeming with writhing vines and predatory shadows. The journey is perilous, guarded by biosentinels and rogue enforcers who believe humans should be eradicated. If you fail, the mutations will spread, and Lyra will be exiled for her role in this disaster. Lyra gasped, her silver hair falling across her face. Exiled? But I was trying to save him. She turned to Jake, her voice cracking. Your biology is so unpredictable. I didn't know it would disrupt the archive. If we don't act, Zynara could collapse into chaos. Jake's grin widened, though his gut tightened. A jungle full of killer plants and alien cops who wanted him dead? Just another Monday. Sounds like a party. What's the plan, Purple? We stroll into this jungle, punch a few buttons, and save the day. He stood, ignoring the ache in his ribs, his cocky swagger in full force. I've handled worse odds. The doctor scoffed, his voice dripping with contempt. You jest, human, but the bioarchive is alive. It will test your compatibility with Lyra, your ability to work as one. Your bond, however accidental, must hold, or you'll both be consumed. He gestured to a wall, which slid open to reveal a corridor glowing with green mist, leading toward the jungle's edge. The council expects results by dawn, or they'll purge the archive, and you with it. Lyra grabbed Jake's arm, her touch warm and urgent, sending a spark through his skin. I didn't mean for this, she whispered, her eyes glistening. I thought I was helping you, but now, we're in this together. Her grip tightened, and Jake saw a flicker of defiance in her gaze, a spark that matched his own. Hey, Jake said, his tone softening but still edged with mischief. I've crashed ships and walked away. A mutant jungle's nothing. You and me, we'll fix this archive and show these Zynarans what humans are made of. He winked, hoping his confidence hid the fact that he was flying blind. But if we're bonded for life, I'm calling dibs on the top bunk. Lyra's lips twitched, a hesitant smile breaking through her fear. You are infuriating, Jake Sullivan. She released his arm and stepped toward the misty corridor, her purple skin gleaming with resolve. The jungle's eerie glow beckoned, promising danger and the unknown. Jake followed, his heart pounding, not just from a mission, but from the electric pull of the woman beside him, whose mistake had turned his crash landing into a fight for a planet's survival. The corridor's green mist swirled around Jake Sullivan and Lyra as they stepped out into the forbidden jungle, the air heavy with a scent like burnt sugar and ozone. The landscape was nothing like Earth, sprawling, fleshy trees pulsed with veins of amber sap, their branches coiling like living tendrils. Magnetic currents crackled overhead, bending the sky into waves of shimmering static, as if the planet itself was arguing with gravity. Jake's boots sank into the spongy ground, each step releasing a faint hum that made his teeth buzz. He glanced at Lyra, her purple skin catching the strange light, her silver hair tied back to reveal a face set with determination, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. All right, Purple, Jake said, his voice light despite the alien weirdness pressing in. This place looks like a fever dream. You got a map to this bioarchive, or are we just winging it? He patted the utility belt they'd given him, stocked with Zynaran tools he barely understood, a sonic prod, a plasma cutter, and something that looked like a glow stick on steroids. Lyra's lips pursed, her gaze scanning the writhing foliage. Winging it is not a Zynaran concept, she said, her tone clipped but softer than before. The archive's core lies deep within the jungle, guided by biomarkers only a Zynaran can sense. She tapped a small device on her wrist, which hummed and projected a faint trail of light that snaked through the trees. Stay close. The jungle is alive, and it does not welcome outsiders. Jake grinned, falling in his step beside her. Outsider's my middle name. So this bond thing, how's it work? Are we sharing brainwaves, or just stuck with matching tattoos? He was half joking, but the question hung between them, the weight of their accidental connection impossible to ignore. Lyra hesitated, her fingers brushing the device as she walked. The bonding protocol aligns our energies, she said, her voice low, almost reluctant. It's meant to synchronize life forces for healing. But with you, it's unpredictable. I feel your emotions, your impulsiveness like static in my mind. Her cheeks darkened, and she quickened her pace, as if to outrun the admission. Jake's eyebrows shot up. You're saying you're picking up my vibes? That's wild. He chuckled, but the idea sent a shiver down his spine. What's it like being in my head? But it's a party. He nudged her gently, hoping to ease the tension, but his touch made her flinch, her skin flaring brighter for a moment. It's chaotic, Lyra admitted, slowing to meet his gaze. Zynaran's value order control. Your emotions are like a storm, bold, reckless. It's unsettling. Her eyes lingered on his, and Jake caught a spark of curiosity beneath her unease, like she was seeing him for the first time. Unsettling's my specialty, Jake said, his grin softening. But you're not exactly a calm breeze yourself. That whole healing stunt back there? Bold move for a rule follower. He winked, and to his surprise, Lyra's lips twitched into a faint smile, her defenses cracking just a bit. I thought I was saving your life, she said, her voice tinged with exasperation. Your biology is so primitive. No Zynaran would react that way to a simple touch. She shook her head, but there was a warmth in her tone, a grudging respect that hadn't been there before. Jake laughed, ducking under a coiling branch that seemed to reach for him. Primitive? I'll take that as a compliment. Keeps things interesting. He glanced at her, noticing the way her shoulders relaxed slightly, the way her eyes darted to him when she thought he wasn't looking. The jungle's hum filled the silence, but the air between them crackled with something else, something neither was ready to name. As they pushed deeper, the jungle grew hostile. A low growl rumbled from the shadows, and Lyra froze, her wrist device beeping frantically. Bio-Sentinel, she whispered, grabbing Jake's arm. Before he could ask, a creature emerged. Part plant, part beast, its body a tangle of thorny vines with glowing eyes like molten glass. It lunged, and Lyra shoved Jake aside, raising her sonic prod. The weapon hummed, but the sentinel barely flinched, its vines whipping toward her. Primitive, huh? Jake muttered, scrambling to his feet. His pilot instincts kicked in, and he grabbed the plasma cutter from his belt. The tool wasn't meant for combat, but Jake had jury-rigged worse. He aimed at the sentinel's base, where its vines seemed to root into the ground, and fired. A burst of heat seared through the creature, and it shrieked, collapsing into a smoldering heap. The jungle's hum faltered, as if surprised. Lyra stared, her prod still raised, her eyes wide. How did you? That was reckless, she said, but there was no venom in her voice, only astonishment. Zynaran weapons are calibrated for precision, not whatever that was. Jake shrugged, wiping sweat from his brow. Human trick, hit him where they're weak. Precision's overrated when you're in a pinch. He offered her a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it, her grip firm but warm. The touch sent a jolt through him, and he wondered if she felt it too, that strange bond humming between them. You could have died, Lyra said, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. Why risk it for me? She released his hand, but her eyes held his, searching for something she didn't understand. Jake's grin faded, his tone earnest for once. You're stuck with me, purple. Can't let my partner get eaten by a plant monster before we save the planet. He paused, then added, Besides, I'm starting to like your brand of chaos. Lyra's cheeks darkened again, and she turned away, but not before Jake caught the hint of a smile. You are impossible, she muttered, but there was a lightness in her step as they continued, the biomarker's trail glowing brighter ahead. The jungle grew denser, the magnetic currents above sparking like a storm. Lyra explained Zynaran culture as they walked, how their society prized harmony, how the bioarchive was their greatest achievement, a living testament to their control over nature. Jake listened, but his mind kept drifting to her quiet strength, her flashes of defiance, the way she'd pushed him out of danger without a second thought. He told her about Earth, about dive bars and starlit flights, and she laughed, a sound like wind chimes that made his chest ache. But the jungle wasn't done with them. The ground trembled, and Lyra's device screeched, its light flickering. "The archive's corruption is spreading," she said, her voice tight. "The biomarkers are destabilizing. If we don't reach the core soon, the mutations will overtake us." Her eyes met Jake's, fear mingling with resolve. "And the enforcers, they're closing in. I can sense their signals." Jake's jaw tightened. Enforcers, mutant plants, and a ticking clock. The odds were stacking up, and he loved it. "Then we move faster," he said, his voice steady. "You guide, I'll improvise." "Deal." He held out his fist, a human gesture she didn't know, but her hand brushed his knuckles, a tentative mimicry that felt like a promise. As they plunged deeper, the jungle's hum grew feral, and shadows moved in the distance. Enforcers, or something worse. Jake's heart pounded, not just from danger, but from the woman beside him, whose bond was starting to feel less like a mistake and more like a mission he'd never expected to sign up for. Fleshy trees loomed overhead, their amber-veined branches twitching like hungry fingers, while electromagnetic arcs crackled in the sky, casting jagged shadows that danced across Lyra's purple skin. Her wrist device flickered erratically, its biomarker trail stuttering as the jungle's chaos intensified. Jake's grip tightened on the plasma cutter at his belt, his pilot instincts screaming that trouble was closer than the distant enforcer signals Lyra had sensed. "Purple, your gadget's throwing a tantrum," Jake said, his voice steady but laced with an edge of urgency. He sidestepped a coiling vine that snapped at his ankle, its tip glistening with a venomous sheen. "This jungle's starting to feel personal. You sure we're still on the right path?" Lyra's emerald eyes flicked to her device, then to the writhing foliage, her silver braids swaying as she moved with a grace that belied her tension. "The biomarkers are destabilizing faster than I anticipated," she said, her tone formal but strained, like a taut wire. "The archive's corruption is rewriting the jungle's biology. We must hurry, or the core will be unreachable." She met his gaze, and for a moment, her composure cracked, revealing a flicker of fear. "Your presence, it's accelerating the anomaly. I feel it through the bond. Your chaos is bleeding into me." Jake's eyebrows shot up, his grin masking the unease her words stirred. "My chaos? Darling, that's just my charm in overdrive. You're saying I'm messing with your head and your planet." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a teasing murmur. "Gotta admit, that's a hell of a superpower." Lyra's cheeks darkened to a deep plum, but her eyes flashed with a mix of exasperation and something softer. Curiosity, maybe, or reluctant admiration. "This is no jest, Jake Sullivan," she said, her voice softening despite herself. "The bonding protocol was meant to harmonize, but your human unpredictability, it's like a wildfire in my mind. I'm trained to maintain order, yet I'm fighting to keep my thoughts clear around you." She paused, her gaze lingering on his, as if wrestling with a confession. "It's disorienting." Jake's grin softened, his usual bravado giving way to a rare sincerity. "Disorienting, huh? Well, you're not exactly a walk in the park yourself, Purple. That stunt in the med bay took us to jumping like that, rules be damned." He ducked under a pulsating branch, his shoulder brushing hers, sending a spark through the bond that made them both pause. "Maybe we're both a little out of our depth here, but I'm betting we can handle it, together." Lyra's lips parted, as if to argue, but a sudden tremor shook the ground, cutting her off. Her device screeched, its light extinguishing entirely. "The markers are gone," she whispered, her voice tight with dread. "The corruption's overtaken the path." Before Jake could respond, a metallic whine pierced the air, and the jungle parted to reveal a trap, a shimmering net of energy filaments, crackling with lethal intent. Enforcers. Their cloaked forms emerged from the shadows, their gray skin blending with the foliage, their weapons humming with a predatory glow. "Human contaminant," one enforcer barked, his voice a guttural hiss. "You defile the archive. Surrender, or we purge you both." The net tightened, its filaments slicing through a nearby tree, which dissolved into a sizzling puddle. Jake's jaw clenched, his mind racing like it did in a dogfight. Purge? That's a bit dramatic, even for you guys. He glanced at Lyra, whose hand hovered over her sonic prod, her eyes darting between the enforcers and the net. Purple, tell me you've got a fancy Zynaran trick for this. Lyra's voice was low, urgent, her formal tone fraying under pressure. Their net disrupts bioenergy. My prod is useless against it. She met his gaze, and through the bond, Jake felt a surge of her fear, and her trust, sharp and unexpected. You're the improviser, Jake. What would a human do? Jake's grin returned, a spark of defiance in his eyes. A human? We make do. He scanned the trap, noticing how the filaments pulsed in sync with the jungle's electromagnetic currents. An idea clicked. He grabbed the glow-stick-like device from his belt, the one he hadn't figured out yet, and cracked it open, exposing its humming core. This thing's got juice, right? Let's give their net a bad day. Lyra's eyes widened. That's a biostabilizer. It's for recalibrating the archive, not... She stopped, catching the glint in his eye. You're insane. Insane's my brand, Jake said, already moving. He lobbed the stabilizer into the net's center, where it sparked and whined, overloading the filaments with a chaotic burst of energy. The net flickered, then collapsed, sending the enforcer scrambling. Jake grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her through the gap. Run now. Argue later. They sprinted through the jungle, the enforcer's shouts fading behind them. But the ground quaked harder, and the trees began to writhe, their branches lashing out like whips. Lyra's breath came in sharp gasps, her hand still in Jake's, the bond pulsing with a mix of adrenaline and something deeper. The corruption's spreading too fast, she said, her voice raw. The archive is fighting back. It senses you as a threat. Jake's chest tightened, not just from the run, but from the weight of her words. Great. Now the planet's got a personal grudge. Any chance it'll listen to an apology? He dodged a snapping vine, his free hand gripping the plasma cutter, ready for the next fight. Lyra's laugh was short, almost involuntary, a sound that caught Jake off guard. You apologize? That would be unprecedented. She squeezed his hand, her voice softening despite the chaos. But your recklessness, it's not just chaos. It's effective. I've never seen anyone defy Zynaran logic like you do. Jake's heart skipped, her words hitting harder than he expected. Stick with me, Purple. I'll show you how humans turn screw-ups into wins. But as they ran, the jungle's hum grew deafening, and a new shadow loomed ahead. A massive, pulsating structure that could only be the bioarchive's core, its surface crawling with mutated vines and glowing with a malevolent light. The enforcer's signals were closing in again, and the air crackled with the promise of worse to come. The bioarchive's core loomed before Jake Sullivan and Lyra, a grotesque monolith of writhing vines and glowing nodes that pulsed like a diseased heart. Its surface churned with mutated growths, spitting sparks that hissed against the spongy ground. The forbidden jungle's air was thick, electric, the burnt sugar scent now laced with a sour rot that stung Jake's lungs. Electromagnetic arcs overhead flared brighter, their crackles drowning out the enforcer's distant signals, though Jake's gut told him those gray-skinned zealots were closer than ever. Lyra's wrist device was dead, its screen black, leaving only her Zynaran instincts to guide them. Her purple skin glistened with sweat, her silver braid fraying as she scanned the core, her emerald eyes sharp but shadowed with dread. Purple, that thing looks like it's about to blow, Jake said, his voice low but carrying a forced calm. He gripped the plasma cutter, its hum a faint comfort against the core's ominous throb. You sure we just stroll up and hit the reset button? 'Cause I'm betting it's got a few opinions about us. Lyra's gaze flicked to him, her formal tone fraying under the strain. The core is alive, Jake, and it's angry. Your human biology has disrupted its harmony, and it's fighting to expel us. She stepped closer to the monolith, her fingers tracing the air as if feeling invisible currents. I can sense its patterns, but they're chaotic, your chaos. We need to interface with it, but the bond, it's making my readings unstable. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. I feel you too much. Jake's grin flickered, her words hitting like a stray plasma bolt. Feel me, huh? Didn't know I was that distracting. He leaned closer, his tone teasing but laced with something softer. What's it like, Lyra? My chaos messing with your perfect Zynaran headspace? Spill it. She turned, her eyes locking onto his, and for a moment, the jungle's roar faded. It's like a pulse that won't stop, she said, her voice raw, unguarded. Your defiance, your warmth. It's pulling me away from duty, from control. Zynarans don't feel like this. Wild, uncertain. You're making me question everything I was trained for. Her cheeks darkened, and she looked away, but the bond hummed between them, a shared current of fear and trust that made Jake's chest ache. He swallowed, his usual swagger faltering. Hell, Purple, you're doing the same to me. I'm a lone wolf, always have been, but you're making me want to stick around, even with this death trap of a planet. He reached out, his hand brushing hers, and the spark was electric, grounding them both. We're in this mess together. Let's make it count. Lyra's fingers curled around his, a fleeting grip before she pulled back, her resolve hardening. Then we faced the core. Now, she moved toward the monolith, but the ground quaked, and a seam split open on the core's surface, vomiting a swarm of tendrils, black, segmented, tipped with glowing barbs that screamed as they lashed out. Jake yanked Lyra back, narrowly dodging a barb that gouged the ground, leaving a smoking crater. Guess it's not a fan of visitors, Jake shouted, firing the plasma cutter. The beam seared through a tendril, but more surged forward, their movements synchronized, as if the core was learning. Lyra's sonic prod hummed, its pulses scattering the smaller tendrils, but the larger ones kept coming, forcing them back to back. It's adapting, Lyra gasped, her voice tight with focus. The Archive's defenses are rewriting themselves to counter us. We need to reach the neural hub. There. She pointed to a glowing node high on the core, pulsing faster than the rest, encased in a cage of writhing vines. It controls the interface. If we can stabilize it, we can reset the corruption. Jake's mind raced, his pilot instincts kicking into overdrive. The hub was a good 20 feet up, surrounded by a death trap of tendrils. His belt held only the plasma cutter and a half-charged sonic prod, hardly a ladder. But then he remembered the Enforcer's trap, how the biostabilizer had overloaded their net by syncing with the jungle's currents. The core was alive, electric just like the jungle. A crazy idea sparked. Lyra, that biostabilizer I chucked at the net. Got another? He asked, dodging a tendril that nearly took his head off. I'm thinking we give this core a taste of its own medicine. Her eyes widened, but she nodded, pulling a second stabilizer from her belt. It's meant to recalibrate the archive, not whatever you're planning. She hesitated, then tossed it to him, her trust palpable through the bond. Do it, Jake. I'll cover you. Jake caught the device, its core humming like a trapped star. Cover me? You're stealing my lines. Purple. He grinned, then sprinted toward the core, weaving through tendrils as Lyra's prod pulses lit up the air, drawing the swarm's attention. His boots skidded on the spongy ground, but he pushed forward, the bond's pulse urging him on. He reached the core's base, where the vines were thickest, and cracked the stabilizer open, exposing its glowing innards. Here's for messing with my day. Jake jammed the stabilizer into a pulsing vine, twisting it to sync with the core's rhythm. The device whined, then erupted in a cascade of sparks, sending a shockwave through the core. The tendrils froze, shuddering, and the neural hub's cage flickered, its vines loosening. Jake didn't wait. He climbed, using the stunned vines as handholds, his muscles burning as he hauled himself toward the hub. Lyra's shout cut through the chaos. Jake, the Enforcers. He glanced back to see gray-skinned figures emerging from the jungle, their weapons raised, but Lyra was already moving, her prod flashing as she held them off. The bond surged, her courage flooding him, and he pushed higher, reaching the hub. Its glow was blinding, but he saw a port, a slot that matched the sonic prod's tip. Time to play nice, you overgrown weed, Jake muttered, slamming the prod into the port. The core screamed, a sound that rattled his bones, and the hub pulsed wildly, sending a wave of energy through the jungle. The tendrils collapsed, and the core's glow dimmed, its mutations slowing. But the bond flared, and Jake felt a jolt. Not just Lyra's relief, but something deeper, a truth the core had unlocked. He slid down, landing hard beside Lyra, who was panting, her prod smoking. The enforcers had retreated, spooked by the core's reaction, but the jungle was still, too still. Lyra grabbed his arm, her eyes wide. "You did it, the corruption's stabilizing. But the bond, it's changed." She hesitated, her voice trembling. "The archive didn't just link us, Jake. It's rewriting me with you. My biology, my emotions, they're becoming human." Jake's breath caught, the weight of her words sinking in. "Human? Purple, you saying I'm turning you into a reckless hotshot like me?" He tried to grin, but his heart was pounding. The bond wasn't just a mistake. It was merging them, making Lyra something new, something neither Zynaran nor human could predict. The core's hum softened, as if watching, and Jake knew this was no victory. It was a turning point, one that meant they weren't just fighting for Zynara anymore. They were fighting for what they were becoming. The forbidden jungle exhaled a heavy silence, its pulsating trees frozen, their amber veins dimmed as if holding their breath. Jake Sullivan stood beside Lyra, his boots sinking into the spongy ground, the plasma cutter still warm in his hand. The bioarchive's core loomed before them, its grotesque surface now eerily still, the mutated vines slumped like defeated serpents. The air carried a faint hum, less feral than before, but Jake's gut screamed that the fight wasn't over. Lyra's grip on his arm tightened, her purple skin slick with sweat, her emerald eyes wide with a mix of awe and dread. Her words, asterisk my biology, my emotions becoming human asterisk, echoed in his mind, a truth that felt heavier than the monolith they just tamed. "Purple, you look like you just saw a ghost," Jake said, his voice light but strained, his pilot's grin flickering under the weight of a revelation. He glanced at her, catching the frayed silver braid and the way her chest heaved, her fiery form radiating a heat that made his pulse jump. "This bond, turning you human, that mean you're going to start craving burgers and bad decisions?" Lyra's gaze snapped to his, her lips parting in a half-exasperated huff. "This is no time for your human levity, Jake Sullivan." Her voice was sharp, but the bond pulsed with a warmth that betrayed her, a flicker of amusement she couldn't hide. "The core is stabilizing, but the corruption's roots run deeper than I feared. It's evolving, using our bond to rewrite itself." She stepped closer to the core, her fingers tracing the air, sensing currents Jake couldn't see. "We've only slowed it. If we don't purge the anomaly completely, it'll surge again, stronger, unstoppable." Jake's eyebrows shot up, his mind racing like it did in a dogfight. "Stronger? So what, we just shocked the beast, and now it's waking up pissed." He scanned the core, its nodes pulsing faintly, like a heartbeat biding its time. The jungle's silence felt wrong, too heavy, and the distant crackle of enforcer signals pricked his ears. "What's the play, Lyra? Hit it again, or is there a bigger button to push?" Lyra's eyes narrowed, her formal tone fraying as she spoke. "There's a deeper interface, a synaptic nexus beneath the core. It's the archive's mind, where all Zynaran genetic codes converge. If we can access it, I can recalibrate the system, purge your anomaly." She hesitated, her voice dropping. "But it's dangerous. The nexus will test our bond, our unity. If we're not aligned, it could reject us, or worse, amplify the corruption, merging us further." Jake let out a low whistle, his grin masking the chill her words sent down his spine. "Merge us further? Purple, I'm already sharing headspace with you. What's next? Matching outfits." He leaned closer, his tone teasing but laced with a raw edge. "Level with me, Lyra. What's this test going to do to us? 'Cause I'm not big on becoming a science experiment." Her gaze met his, unflinching, and the bond hummed with a raw intensity that made Jake's breath catch. "The nexus will expose us," she said, her voice soft but steady. Our fears, our truths, everything we hide. Zynarans are trained to suppress such chaos. But your human emotions are too volatile. If we falter, the Nexus could trap us in its neural web or rewrite us completely. Her cheeks darkened, and she added, almost a whisper, I'm already changing, Jake. I feel reckless like you. It terrifies me. Jake's grin faded, her vulnerability hitting harder than any vine monster. He reached out, his hand resting on her shoulder, the touch grounding them both. Terrified, huh? Welcome to the human club, Purple. We're all a little scared, but we keep flying. His voice softened, his usual swagger giving way to something real. You're not alone in this. I'm here, chaos and all. Let's face this Nexus and show it who's boss. Lyra's lips twitched, a faint smile breaking through her fear. You are infuriatingly optimistic, she said, but her hand covered his, her touch warm and firm. The bond surged, a shared pulse of defiance, and Jake felt her courage mingle with his, like fuel to his fire. But the moment shattered as the ground quaked, and a low, guttural hum erupted from the core. Its nodes flared, spitting arcs of green energy that scorched the air, and the jungle roared back to life, its trees writhing with renewed fury. Jake! Lyra shouted, yanking him back as a vine lashed out, its barbed tip grazing his arm, leaving a stinging burn. The core's surface split, revealing a glowing chasm beneath, a spiraling tunnel of organic circuits and pulsing light, leading to the synaptic nexus. But the vines were regrouping, thicker now, their tips glowing with a venomous hunger. The Enforcer's signals grew louder, their metallic whines cutting through the chaos, and Jake glimpsed gray shapes moving through the foliage, closing in fast. Looks like the party's starting, Jake yelled, firing the plasma cutter at a vine that lunged for Lyra. The beam sliced through, but more surged from the chasm, as if the Nexus itself was fighting to keep them out. Purple, we need to dive in now. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the chasm, but Lyra resisted, her eyes locked on the core. The Nexus is waking, she cried, her voice tight with urgency. It's sensing our bond, testing us already. She pointed to the chasm, where the organic circuits pulsed in sync with their heartbeats, a rhythmic throb that felt too personal, too alive. We can't just charge in. We need a plan, Jake. Your human tricks won't work here. Jake's jaw clenched, his pilot instincts screaming to act, but her words held weight. The Nexus wasn't just tech. It was alive, and it knew them. He scanned the chasm, noticing how the circuits seemed to hum louder when he and Lyra touched, as if their bond was the key. An idea sparked, reckless but human. You said it's testing our unity, right? What if we lean into this bond? Crank it to 11. Hit the Nexus with everything we've got together. Lyra's eyes widened, her breath hitching. Amplify the bond? That's unprecedented. It could overwhelm the Nexus or us. But her gaze softened, and through the bond, Jake felt her trust, sharp and unwavering. If we do this, we face it as one. No holding back. Jake's grin returned, a spark of defiance in his eyes. No holding back? Now you're speaking my language. Purple. He squeezed her hand, the bond flaring like a live wire, and they stepped toward the chasm, the vines snapping at their heels, the Enforcer's shouts growing closer. The Nexus waited below, its light pulsing with a challenge only they could answer, and Jake knew this was it. The moment they'd either save Zynara or lose themselves to the chaos they'd unleashed. The chasm's pulsing light swallowed Jake Sullivan and Lyra as they descended, the organic circuits of the synaptic nexus thrumming with a rhythm that matched their racing hearts. The air was thick with a metallic tang, the walls of the tunnel writhing like living flesh, their surfaces etched with glowing Zynaran runes that flickered in time with the bond's electric hum. Vines snapped at their heels, their barbed tips grazing Jake's legs, but he kept Lyra's hand in his, her grip a lifeline as they plunged deeper. The Enforcer's metallic whines echoed above, but the Nexus's pull was stronger, its challenge undeniable. Jake's plasma cutter hung heavy at his belt, useless against the Nexus's intangible power, but his mind burned with the reckless plan to amplify their bond. "Purple, this place feels like it's sizing us up," Jake said, his voice steady despite the heat prickling his skin. He dodged a coiling circuit that pulsed too close, its light searing his vision. "You sure about cranking the bond? 'Cause I'm getting the vibe this Nexus ain't gonna play nice." Lyra's emerald eyes glowed in the dim light, her purple skin slick with sweat, her silver braid unraveling as she pressed forward. "It's already testing us," she said, her voice taut but resolute. "The Nexus is a mind. It probes for weakness, for disunity. If we amplify the bond, we overwhelm it with our combined will." Her gaze flicked to his, raw with trust. "Your chaos, my control, together, we're stronger than it expects." Jake's chest tightened, her faith hitting harder than any vine. "Hell yeah, we are," he said, squeezing her hand, the bond flaring like a supernova. The tunnel widened into a vast chamber, its ceiling a dome of writhing circuits that pulsed with a malevolent green glow. At its center floated the synaptic nexus, a crystalline orb the size of a fighter ship, its surface crawling with tendrils of light that lashed out like solar flares. The air crackled, and Jake felt the bond pulse in sync with the orb, a pressure building in his skull like a storm ready to break. The nexus spoke, not in words, but in a flood of sensations that slammed into them both. Jake staggered, his mind flooded with flashes of his life. Dogfights in the nebula, bar brawls on Earth, moments of loneliness he'd buried deep. Beside him, Lyra gasped, her knees buckling as the nexus tore in her too, exposing her fears of failure, her duty to Zynara, her growing pull toward Jake's reckless warmth. The bond burned, merging their emotions into a chaotic torrent, and Jake grit his teeth, fighting to stay grounded. "Purple, it's in our heads," he shouted, pulling her close as a tendril of light lashed out, singeing his arm. "We gotta push back, hit it with everything." He locked eyes with her, willing her to feel his defiance, his trust in her. The Nexus's assault intensified, its light coiling around them, trying to pry their bond apart. But Jake held on, his voice raw. "You're not just a nurse, Lyra. You're a damn force. Let's show this thing what we've got." Lyra's breath hitched, her eyes blazing with a fire that matched his own. "Together," she whispered, her voice steady despite the chaos. She pressed her palm to his chest, her touch igniting the bond, and Jake felt her emotions surge into him. Her discipline, her courage, her newfound recklessness inspired by him. He mirrored her, pouring his defiance, his humor, his stubborn will to survive into the bond, and the Nexus shuddered, its light flickering as their combined energy surged. The chamber quaked, circuits sparking as the Nexus's tendrils recoiled, overwhelmed by the raw power of their unity. Jake's vision blurred, the bond's intensity threatening to consume him, but he focused on Lyra, her purple skin glowing brighter, her silver hair floating as if caught in a magnetic storm. "Keep going, Purple," he yelled, his voice hoarse. "We're breaking it." Lyra nodded, her formal tone gone, replaced by a fierce determination. "For Zynara, for us." She thrust her other hand toward the orb, her fingers tracing Zynaran runes in the air, guiding their bond's energy like a pilot steering through an asteroid field. The Nexus screamed, a sound that shook Jake's bones, and its surface cracked, revealing a pulsing core within, a nexus within the Nexus, raw and vulnerable. Jake's instincts kicked in. "That's the target," he shouted, grabbing the sonic prod from his belt. Its tip glowed, still charged from the core above, and he saw the same port he'd used before, embedded in the orb's cracked surface. But the tendrils were regrouping, lashing out with desperate fury, and the Enforcer's shouts were closer now, their weapons humming through the tunnel's mouth. "Cover me!" Jake yelled, sprinting toward the orb. Lyra's prod pulses lit up the chamber, scattering the tendrils, her movements fluid and fierce, like a warrior born from his chaos. Jake leaped, dodging a lashing tendril, and slammed the prod into the port. The Nexus roared, its light exploding in a blinding wave, and Jake felt the bond surge to a breaking point, his mind and Lyra's merging in a single, searing moment of unity. The orb's core pulsed once, then dimmed, its tendrils collapsing into inert strands. The chamber's hum softened, the circuits stabilizing, and Jake stumbled back, his breath ragged. Lyra caught him, her arms strong despite her trembling, and the bond pulsed with relief, with triumph. The nexus was tamed, its corruption purged, but Jake felt something else, a shift in the bond, a permanence that hadn't been there before. Jake, Lyra's voice was soft, almost reverent, her emerald eyes searching his. We did it. The archive is reset. She hesitated, her hand lingering on his chest. But the bond, it's deeper now. I feel you, not just your chaos, but you. Her cheeks darkened, and Jake saw a spark of something new in her gaze. Something human, something reckless. Jake's grin was shaky but real. Guess we're stuck with each other. Purple. Not complaining, though. He pulled her closer, the bond humming with a warmth that felt like home. And for a moment, the jungle, the enforcers, the chaos faded. They'd faced the Nexus and won, not just for Zynara, but for what they'd become. Two souls, human and Zynaran, forged into something unstoppable. The synaptic Nexus's chamber fell into a hushed stillness, its once frantic circuits now pulsing with a steady, subdued glow. Jake Sullivan leaned against Lyra, his chest heaving, the sonic prod still warm in his hand, its tip faintly smoking from its clash with the orb. The air, thick with the metallic tang of scorched vines, carried a new softness, as if the forbidden jungle itself exhaled in relief. Lyra's arms steadied him, her purple skin warm against his, her emerald eyes wide with a mix of exhaustion and awe. The bond between them thrummed, no longer a chaotic storm but a deep, resonant current, binding them in a way that felt irrevocable. The Nexus's crystalline orb hovered silently, its cracked surface dim, a defeated giant tamed by their unity. Lyra's breath hitched, her voice a trembling whisper as she broke the silence. Jake, the Nexus, it's stable. The corruption is gone. Her fingers tightened on his arm, her gaze darting to the orb, then back to him, as if afraid the victory might unravel. Your recklessness, my discipline. It worked. We overwhelmed it. A faint smile curved her lips, a spark of human warmth breaking through her Zynaran reserve. I didn't think we could. Jake's grin was lopsided, his usual swagger softened by the weight of what they'd done. Told ya, purple. Humans don't quit, and you're picking up the knack. He straightened, wincing at the burn on his arm, but his eyes held hers, the bond pulsing with a shared triumph that made his chest ache. But that bond thing, you weren't kidding about it getting deeper. Feels like you're part of me now. Her cheeks darkened to a bruised plum, but she didn't look away. It's more than that, she said, her voice soft but firm. The Nexus didn't just reset the archive, it rewove us. I feel emotions I wasn't trained for. Courage, defiance, hope. She hesitated, her hand sliding to his, the touch sending a spark through them both. You've changed me, Jake. I'm not just Zynaran anymore. Before Jake could respond, a low hum stirred the chamber, and the jungle outside roared back to life. Not with hostility, but with a vibrant, harmonious pulse. Trees straightened, their amber veins glowing brighter, healthier, as if the archive's restoration had breathed new life into Zynara. But the moment was cut short by a sharp metallic whine. The enforcers. Their gray forms emerged at the chamber's entrance, weapons lowered, their faces a mix of shock and reluctance. The lead enforcer stepped forward, his voice grudging. The archive's harmony is restored. The human is no contaminant. Jake raised an eyebrow, his grin returning. Nice of you to catch up, pal. Now, how about calling off the purge? He squeezed Lyra's hand, feeling her relief through the bond, but also a flicker of defiance that matched his own. The enforcer's gaze flicked to Lyra, then back to Jake. The council will decide your fate, but for now you've earned passage. He gestured to the tunnel, now clear of vines, its runes glowing with approval. Lyra's shoulders relaxed, but her eyes held Jake's, a silent vow that their fight wasn't over. not for Zynara, and not for what they'd become. The synaptic nexus's chamber glowed with a serene hum, its circuits now a soft pulse of green light that bathed Jake Sullivan and Lyra in a gentle warmth. The forbidden jungle outside thrummed with renewed life, its fleshy trees standing tall, their amber veins gleaming like veins of gold. Jake's arms stung from a tendril's graze, but he stood steady, Lyra's hand in his, her touch a quiet anchor amidst the fading chaos. The enforcers lingered at the chamber's edge, their gray faces etched with reluctant awe, their weapons silent. The lead enforcer's words, "The human is no contaminant," echoed in Jake's mind, a grudging admission that felt like a victory sweeter than any dogfight. Lyra's emerald eyes met his, her breath steadying, and the bond between them hummed, a deep, unshakable thread that made Jake feel like he'd found something he hadn't known he was missing. "Purple, we just saved a planet," Jake said, his voice rough but warm, a grin tugging at his lips despite the ache in his bones. "Gotta say, you make one hell of a wingman." He squeezed her hand, feeling her pulse through the bond, a rhythm that matched his own in a way that still threw him for a loop. Lyra's lips curved, a smile that carried a spark of his own mischief. "Wingman? Your human terms are absurd, Jake Sullivan." Her voice was soft, but the bond pulsed with a lightness that hadn't been there before, a hint of playfulness that made her seem less Zynaran, more human. "But you defied every expectation. Zynara owes you its harmony." Her fingers tightened, and Jake caught a flush in her cheeks, a deep plum that betrayed the emotion she was still learning to name. Before he could tease her, a low chime rang through the chamber, and the enforcers parted as a new figure approached, a Zynaran elder, her skin a shimmering silver, her eyes sharp with authority. The council's envoy. She stopped before Jake and Lyra, her gaze sweeping over them, lingering on their joined hands. "The bioarchive is restored," she said, her voice resonating like a struck bell. "The human's anomaly has been purged, and Zynara breathes anew. The council acknowledges your unorthodox success." Her eyes narrowed at Jake, but a flicker of respect broke through her stern facade. "You are no longer a threat, Jake Sullivan. You are a catalyst." Jake raised an eyebrow, his grin widening. "Catalyst? I'll take that over contaminant any day." He glanced at Lyra, catching her stifled smile, and felt a surge of pride, not just for himself, but for what they'd done together. The elder's gaze softened, and she gestured to the tunnel, now clear and glowing with runes that seemed to hum in approval. "Return to the city. The council awaits to honor you, and to address the bond you forged." The trek back through the jungle was quieter, the trees no longer snapping but swaying gently, as if in gratitude. Lyra walked close, her shoulder brushing Jake's, the bond a steady current that carried her emotions, relief, pride, and something deeper, a warmth that made Jake's heart skip. They emerged into Zynara's sprawling city, its spires aglow under a sky streaked with magnetic arcs, and found a crowd waiting. Zynarans, once cold and dismissive, now watched with curiosity, some even bowing as Jake and Lyra passed. The council's chamber loomed ahead, a dome of crystalline light, and Jake felt Lyra's hand slip into his again, her grip firm, defiant. Inside, the council stood in a semicircle, their silver and gray skins glinting under the dome's glow. The elder spoke first, her voice carrying a weight that silenced the room. "Jake Sullivan, your actions have preserved our world. Your human chaos, once deemed a flaw, proved our salvation." She paused, her eyes flicking to Lyra. "And you, Lyra, have transcended your training. Your bond with this human has reshaped you, and in doing so, reshaped us." A murmur rippled through the council, but the elder raised a hand. "We offer you both a place here as equals. Zynara needs your unique harmony." Jake's chest tightened, the weight of the offer hitting hard. A place on Zynara? He'd always been a drifter, chasing the next thrill, but the bond with Lyra felt like an anchor, grounding him in a way he'd never known. He glanced at her, catching the spark in her eyes, and knew she felt it too. Equals, huh? He said, his tone light, but his gaze steady. Sounds nice, but I'm not big on speeches. What do you say, Purple? You ready to shake up this planet with me? Lyra's laugh was soft, a sound that warmed him like a star's glow. You are impossible, she said, but her voice carried a resolve that matched his own. I was trained to preserve order, but with you, I've learned to embrace the storm. She turned to the council, her chin high. I choose to stay with Jake, to learn what this bond means for Zynara and for us. Her hand tightened in his, and the bond surged, a promise that needed no words. The council nodded, and the chamber erupted in a soft hum, a Zynaran gesture of unity. Outside, the city glowed brighter, its people gathering for a festival to celebrate the archive's rebirth. Jake and Lyra stepped into the night, the air alive with music and light. And for the first time, Jake didn't feel like an outsider. Lyra leaned close, her voice a whisper. Your chaos saved us, Jake, and it's saving me. Her eyes held his, and he saw the human spark in her, a recklessness born of their bond. Jake grinned, pulling her into a gentle embrace, the bond humming like a song only they could hear. Guess we're rewriting the stars, Purple, ready for the next adventure. She smiled, her lips brushing his cheek, and the crowd cheered, unaware that the human and Zynaran before them had just begun to change the galaxy. As they stood together, the sky flared with a new arc, a fleeting sign that their story was far from over. But for now, they'd earned their place, side by side, human and Zynaran, unstoppable.